All right, so let's jump right in. I want you to picture this. You've got a junior analyst. Let's call her Alex. She's deep in a security test. She uncovers a vulnerability, and the scanner does its thing. It spits out a rating. You know the drill. It's one of those standard scores we see all the time. But here's the thing. Something just doesn't feel right to her. The rating, it doesn't quite capture the actual danger she's staring at. And believe me, this isn't just a story about Alex. It's a super common problem in our field.
And what does the scanner say? Severity, high. Okay, fair enough. That's a decent starting point, right? I mean, it definitely gets your attention. But here's the problem. A high rating all by itself, it's almost never the full story. It's kind of like hearing one single loud note from an orchestra. You know something's happening, but you have absolutely no idea what the song is.
Which brings us to the real heart of the issue, doesn't it? But how high is high? This is exactly where those standard, canned ratings can be so misleading, sometimes even dangerously so. See, if you don't understand the specific environment, the business context, the whole attacker's path, that generic little label can make your team either freak out over nothing or, and this is way worse, completely ignore a ticking time bomb. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll talk about why high just isn't enough. Then we'll get into a framework called COBRA, which is all about context. We'll break down the two main steps, attack complexity and gauging the impact. After that, we'll run through a real case study, the leaky share. And finally, we'll see how to visualize all this risk for the folks in charge. All right, section 1, when high isn't enough. So back to our story. This is the moment a senior analyst, we'll call him Sam, comes over. He sees Alex kind of wrestling with this rating, and he gets it immediately. He tells her, "You've just hit on one of the biggest, most stubborn problems we face in cyber testing, the limits of these canned ratings." And this quote really nails it. Here's the deal. Not all systems are created equal, right? A standard scoring system, something like CVSS, it might look at getting root on a network printer and getting domain admin on the main controller and score them pretty much the same. Why? Because to the algorithm, it's just complete system takeover. But let's be real. To an attacker, and more importantly, to the business, one of those is a headache. The other, it's game over. It's a catastrophe. Okay, on to section 2, COBRA. Context is everything. So Sam tells Alex, look, we do things differently here. We use an approach that forces us to add that missing context. It's called COBRA. That stands for Contextual Objective Rating Framework. And get this, it was actually built by Lockheed Martin's own red team. And that's the secret sauce right there. It was built by attackers for defenders. It's all about teaching you to think like one. And, at its heart, COBRA is actually pretty simple. It really just boils everything down to two basic questions that get right to the point of any attack. Question 1. How hard was it really for us, acting as the attacker, to pull this off? That's your attack complexity. And question 2. Okay, we did it. So what? What's the big deal? What did we actually accomplish? And that's the impact. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because you can see how COBRA completely reframes the conversation. CVSS tends to be pretty generic, but COBRA gets specific. For instance, it adds this idea of discoverability, like how hard was it to even find this thing in the first place? And it uses real attacker language. Instead of some vague term like scope change, COBRA asks a much better question. Could we pivot? Could we achieve lateral movement? It literally forces you to put on that attacker hat. Okay, step 1, attack complexity. Let's dig into how we actually measure the how hard was it part. So Sam starts breaking it down for Alex. This is where we go from just a gut feeling to a real objective number. And Sam uses this brilliant analogy to explain it. Think about an unlocked door. Is an unlocked door a problem? Well, that depends, right? If that door just leads to a dusty old broom closet, the impact is pretty low. But what if that exact same unlocked door leads to the main bank vault? Now the impact is absolutely critical. See, the vulnerability, the unlocked door, is identical. It's the context that changes everything. And COBRA is basically the tool that helps us figure out if we just found the closet or the vault. And you know what? Figuring out the complexity score is way easier than you might think. You just have to answer 3 straightforward questions. First, did this attack rely on another one? Was it part of a chain? Yes or no? Second, how hard was it to discover? Was it easy, like a scanner found it, or hard because it took a ton of manual digging? And third, once you found it, how difficult was it to actually execute? Again, easy, medium, or hard?
So the answers to those 3 questions get crunched into a score, which gives you a super clear complexity rating. If it's trivial, we're talking low effort, stuff you can do with off-the-shelf tools. Moderate means it took a bit more effort, maybe some custom scripting. And complex? Well, that's the big stuff. High effort, specialized skills, maybe even a 0-day. All right, on to step 2, gauging the impact. We've figured out the how hard it was part. Now for the other side of the coin, answering that all-important question. So what happened? This is where Sam shows Alex how you measure the real damage. And just like before, it all comes down to asking the right questions. Where did the attack start? From the Wild West to the internet? Or from inside the trusted intranet? What kind of access did we start with? Were we anonymous or a regular user? And then the big ones. Confidentiality. Did we actually read sensitive program data or PII? Integrity. Could we change that sensitive data? And finally, lateral movement. Did this vulnerability become a doorway to other systems? These are the questions that get to what really truly matters to the business. So, you take the answers to all those impact questions, combine them with the attack complexity score we figured out earlier, and voila! You get a final severity rating that's way more accurate and, frankly, way more defensible. It gives you a clear scale from informational, which is basically a heads up, all the way to critical, which means drop everything and fix this now. Okay, let's get to the fun part. Section 5, the leaky share. Theory is one thing, but let's put COBRA to the test. Sam and Alex go back to her original finding, that one that just didn't feel right, and they're going to run it through COBRA and see how it stacks up against the standard CVSS score. So, here's the finding. A misconfigured file share, wide open to pretty much any user on the company's internal network. And what's on this share? It's not people's vacation photos, I'll tell you that. It is packed with sensitive, proprietary program schematics. We're talking the crown jewels. This is exactly the kind of stuff an attacker would kill for. So, let's run the numbers using COBRA. First, attack complexity. Well, that's a no-brainer. It's trivial. We didn't need another exploit, it was super easy to find, and even easier to get into. But the impact. This is where COBRA really shows its value. The attack starts from the internet, you only need to be a general user. But look at that confidentiality loss. It's high, specifically because it was sensitive program data. And that single piece of context, that's what pushes the final severity rating all the way up to critical. Now, let's compare that to the standard CVSS score for the exact same finding. The inputs, they look pretty similar, right? Low attack complexity, low privileges, high confidentiality. But because CVSS doesn't really have a good way to tell the difference between high confidentiality for some boring system logs and high confidentiality for the company's secret formula, the final score just lands at high. And that right there is the entire point. High is a problem you need to look at. Critical is a 5-alarm fire. And context is what tells you the difference. Okay, last section, visualizing risk for leaders. So for Alex, this is a total game changer. But Sam points out that the job isn't over yet. Look, getting the right number is half the battle. The other half is communicating that risk to leadership, the people who actually have to make the call on where to spend time and money. That is the final and maybe most important step. And one of the coolest things you can do with COBRA data is build visuals like this heat map. It's simple. It plots every finding from your test. You've got attack complexity going up the side and the impact or severity going across the bottom. A leader doesn't need to know what SMB or SQL injection means. Their eyes go straight to that angry red box in the corner, and they instantly know that's where our biggest problems are, the easy-to-pull-off attacks with devastating impact. Here's another great one, the quad chart. Again, you're just plotting every finding based on how hard it was and how bad it was. And anything that falls into that top right quadrant, what the COBRA folks call the worst quad, well, that becomes your immediate to-do list. It's a fantastic way to tell the entire story of your risk in one singular picture. So, when you boil it all down, what are we really getting with a framework like COBRA? Well, first, you get a much more accurate risk assessment. You also get consistency, so a finding from Alex is rated the same as a finding from Sam. It helps you focus your remediation efforts on what actually truly matters. The bank vaults, not the broom closets. And maybe most importantly, it lets you communicate risk clearly to leadership. It helps you have the right conversation. And that really just leaves us with one last question. And this is one for you to take back to your own team. I'm sure when you look at your list of vulnerabilities, you've got plenty of highs on there. But here's the real question. Can you, right now, confidently tell me which of those are just unlocked broom closets and which ones belong in that worst quad?